So when we put the Succeed Act together, we took into consideration a basic fact. In American law, we don't hold children accountable for the actions of their parents. They're caught in between.
That is Oklahoma Senator James Lankford talking about the DACA debate and his legislative response to it. The Trump administration delivering a blow to nearly 800,000 young undocumented immigrants when announced it was ending the DACA program. Will they lose protection from deportation? Congress now has 6 months to act. What is the fate of those dreamers? To answer that for us this morning, let's bring in Senator Lankford into the show. Good morning, Senator.
Hey, good morning to you.
Thank you for being here with us. First and foremost, before we get to your plan, did you agree with President Trump's decision to rescind the DACA program?
I did, because that shouldn't have been an executive action. That should have always been a congressional action. The DACA, many people don't understand. I'm sure that you do well, but many people don't understand DACA is really not a permanent solution. It's basically saying we won't pick you up and deport you for 2 years if you'll just reapply, but it gives them no real status, so they literally are living in limbo. This should have been solved legislatively a long time ago to give some sort of certainty to those individuals rather than a constant every 2-year limbo.
All right, legislatively, you agree, but what about morally, sir? You know, it must be impossible to face those DACA recipients who really have no sense of home and to tell them you technically don't belong here and your fate is now in limbo.
Yeah, that's almost exactly the same words that I have with them when I talk, is that they do not have a home. Many of them came at 6 months, a year, 2 years old. They don't know their home country because they've never returned back to that spot. They've grown up here. They speak English. They're engaged in our economy. They have jobs. They've gone to school or they are in school. It's a very, very difficult situation for them. Many of them actually don't even know that they came here illegally until they graduate high school and their parents sit down with them and say, hey, there's something I need to tell you about going to college. You can't because of XYZ and we're not citizens here. So it's a very difficult situation for them. They didn't choose it. They're living it. As far as these kids know their whole life, they are Americans, and then they suddenly find out they're not. So that's an issue that I think we can resolve, and most Oklahomans that I talk to say we need to find a solution for that group of kids.
And also, what is the big rush here for the Trump administration to end this program? You know, I think a lot of Americans can understand a need to fortify border security, crack down on illegal immigration, but 6 months is a really short window for people who were brought here by their parents to now have to plan for a whole new life somewhere else. What's the rush?
So here's the interesting thing about it. And the president called me about a week after he made that announcement based on some of the things that I had said, as you played the clip on before, as Americans, we don't hold the children accountable for the actions of their parents. The president heard that comment from me. He called me late one and he said, tell me what you're thinking on a legislative solution. And I talked through the details of this bill that I'm working on. And I also said to the president, you've actually given Congress a great gift. Congress has not resolved immigration in 30 years, border security, visa reforms, all the things that need to be done that everyone knows needs to be done, but it's never done because there's no deadline. So the president literally created a deadline and said by this point we need to resolve the issue permanently for these kids that are stuck in DACA, and we need to resolve our border security issues and actually put a plan in place. So as odd as it may sound, that 6-month time period is actually a gift to the United States to be able to have a deadline to actually get this done. Otherwise, 6 years from now, we're still going to be sitting around talking about the same thing.
So let's talk about your legislative response to this. Just this week, you introduced your response to DACA coming to an end. You have named this the Succeed Act. You have said yourself this is for those children specifically, and it's completely merit-based. So please elaborate on the Succeed Act for us.
So these are individuals that grew up in the United States. They're not American citizens, though they're a citizen of another country because they were brought in illegally. But as far as they know, as I've said before, they think they are Americans. So this bill allows them the opportunity to be able to earn that right to be able to be here. It puts them in a position where they can apply. They have a background check, make sure there's no criminal, anything, that they're in school, they're in work, they're in military service, whatever it may be, but they're productive members of society at that point. They get a 5-year waiver. It's a legal status for them. They can work, they can travel, they can go to school, they can do graduate education, all of those things that they'd like to be able to do for 5 years. If everything stays consistent, they stay in work and school, they still have no criminal record, then they're able to reapply for another 5-year time period. They have that same legal status again. If again it stays clean, then they're able to apply one more time and they get a green card at that point. That is what's called legal permanent residence in the United States. At that point, they could stay in legal permanent residence the rest of their life if they want to, or after 5 years of that time, they could apply for naturalization. That 15-year time period, that's really to be able to earn your way into that spot. That 15-year time period is also the same amount of time that if you were overseas and you're applying to get naturalization in the United States that it would take to get that same naturalization. So we're not putting anyone ahead of anyone else. We're making sure that we're lining up and keeping our system consistent on it, but we're also giving some permanency and consistency and a path for individuals to be able to earn their right to be able to stay here in the United States.
And one of the checklist points that I did notice in order for you to gain, CPR status here under the Succeed Act is you had to come to this country before you were 16. Why eliminate 16 and 17-year-olds? I mean, are they not considered children as well? The U.S. Department of State says 18 is the age you enter adulthood. So why before 16? Why not 16 and 17 included in this?
Sure. That's a great question, because most of the countries they're coming from, 16 is considered an adult in that country that they're coming from. The other issue is we're picking the same time period and date and ages that President Obama did in June of 2012. Those individuals that were announced during that time period, we're trying to stay consistent to that. President Obama in June of 2012 said everyone who comes after this point, no matter where you are, you're going to be sent back unless there's an asylum. We're going to process people and we're going to be able to go for it. But everyone before this time period, under these parameters, it will be different. In fact, in June of 2012, President Obama said you had to be in the country by 2007 at that point. We're actually moving it 5 years forward to when he made the announcement, which will pick up some additional people, but we're keeping the same rules that are in place because that's what our government has announced in the past. We want to stay consistent to that. We don't want to encourage future illegal immigration. We don't want to ever tell parents that you can come to the country if you bring your children, you have extra special rights. We don't want to be able to do that. We want to have good, secure borders. There's lots of visa work that needs to be done. There's lots of border security that needs to be done. This DACA piece can only fit in with a larger dealing with immigration reform as a whole as we deal with security, but we want to stay consistent on where we've been on age.
President Trump has given Congress now half a year to act on this. Why should DACA recipients trust your Succeed Act, Senator, or whatever legislation comes down within the next 6 months when DACA recipients themselves have just seen their own protections stripped from them?
Well, they still have the same protections they've had in the past. So when they talk about the next 6 months, it doesn't kick people off in 6 months. That means they stop renewing the program in 6 months. But those individuals that are in it for 2 years. So there is some protected time here. The key issue is Congress needs to resolve this long term, and it needs to be done in the right way. I sat down with some dreamers last weekend and had long conversations, as I've talked to a lot of people that are in the DACA program in the past. This is not a new conversation for me to be able to be in this and try to figure out how we're going to resolve this long term in a way that can actually pass. The DREAM Act that my Democratic colleagues put out 15 years ago now, that's come before Congress 3 times. It's failed all 3 times. In fact, 2 of those times is when Democrats had the House, the Senate, and the White House. They brought the DREAM Act up, and they couldn't pass it among their own colleagues there. The reason is because it is not a well-shaped bill. It's immediate citizenship for them, their families, for everybody else. And even a lot of Democrats say, I understand these kids did nothing wrong, but their parents did violate the law, and there should be some accountability for that. And immediate citizenship is not good accountability related to illegal action. So we're trying to bring a reasonable, common sense response to say, how do we protect these kids? Where do we put it in the framework of a larger border security and immigration reform that we can do as a country? But specifically, how do we resolve this one problem?
And Senator, just one last question for you. I know you are running on a tight schedule here. Anything that you would like to tell the Oklahoma dreamers who are watching this newscast right now who are unsure about their futures?
So obviously their status is not changing at this point. If they're in the DACA program, that's still a protected program. The president said he will honor that, and that Congress is already having very rapid debate on this issue, as much as we can have. We're all extremely aware of the deadline. I've had conversations with the president where he has said he's willing to be able to continue looking at how do we protect these DACA individuals until we get a legislative fix. But we need to get a legislative fix. I don't want to leave them in limbo forever. That doesn't help our economy. That doesn't help our schools. That certainly doesn't help them long term. We've got to get a legislative fix that actually makes it permanent and protects these individuals and also sends a signal to the rest of the world. The rule of law is important. We've got to stop ignoring the rule of law.
Senator James Lankford from Oklahoma, thank you so much, sir, for your time this morning. And we'll stay in touch. Keep us apprised on your Succeed Act.